want to read about the policies from the grassroots level, like different kind of policies till date, whatever has come up in our country. How do I go about it?
I think that is slightly difficult to do because that is very open-ended. You have to make culture, and then you read up the policies and how they've evolved over a period of time in agriculture, and that is when you will have a broader context of how policy operates. Then maybe you move on to other sectors. So I think initially, at least, you have to start in a very targeted way to ensure that you learn something. Otherwise, if you keep it in aware.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Speaker, or they can write it in the comments section. It's completely their choice how they want to ask it. Okay, one question I can see here is, can you compare joining a policy consulting firm with a corporate firm?
Slightly different. I think it's more like a hybrid wherein you don't have a lot of field visits and stuff. You generally work in your office only. There will be some insights that you get while traveling and while doing some primary research, but it's mostly office based. So that way, I think what you're referring to is think tanks. Think tanks operate in a certain way. Their task is generally to research on whatever's happened earlier and what they would be proposing in the times to come. So I think involves some bit of field visit only to get a hang of actually what's happening on the field and how's the feedback in terms of the policies that were already there in place. But broadly, if you look at the culture bit, it's again office based only.
Great, Ayush. So we'll take maximum 3 to 4 questions. So people, if you want to unmute your, then how do you manage both your jobs?
I am not working on my startup right now. Work on any startup for now. If I do have to, I will have to either take a sabbatical or maybe leave this organization so that I can. But definitely not in the pipeline right now. I can maybe think of doing civil services, but that is again a longer term thing. So nothing as of now. I plan to stay where I am.
Okay, great. So can you suggest, some quick tips and tricks so that it can help people who aspire to get involved in any social businesses?
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of networks that are cropping up nowadays. One of them is what I had spoken about earlier, Ashoka Youth Venture Program. So I think these networks are really enablers in a way, and they support all these social entrepreneurship projects that crop up every now and then. That way, I think social entrepreneurship is slightly difficult because if you look at it practically, the amount of returns that you generate are generally low, and the costs that are involved are slightly more. So, to sustain financially over a period of time, you would need an external funder, which initially is a difficult thing to get. So, I think broadly, the way it works is you get into a network, you get to know a lot of people, and that is where you start raising funds from and get that level of support. I think in silos or doing it in isolation, it may be impactful, but definitely at a very small scale. And secondly, I think you will not be able to sustain the organization for a long period of time. So, to do a social enterprise, get into networks, talk to people, and definitely try as many collaborations as possible.
Okay, so we have another question it's from an anonymous person. So he is asking that what things one can add on the resume considering that they cannot do the economic course to increase the chances to get in any development consulting apart from doing MBA or some professional course.
I think there's really no single answer to that. It depends on the recruiter. So it will be difficult for me to tell you one specific thing that will get you a job in any development sector firm. What I would say is that whatever you do, and this goes across, goes for all sectors and jobs for all whatever you have in your resume, that has to be written in a way which brings out the impact immediately. That means that whatever you write has to be substantiated with numbers. So you have to quantify your resume really well. If you're saying that you impacted a lot of people, how many people? If you said that you increased the income of women in these villages, by what percentage? So just quantify that, and even if it's very small, that is fine. I think that bit is important. Secondly, I think bring out the skills that are required in this setup. Not necessarily saying that you wrote a research paper on, let's say, a crop insurance scheme of the government would get you a job, but I think broadly just ensuring that you have all the skills correctly brought through in your resume is what is important. Second, I think, is being very sure about why you want to join the firm. What I've seen across firms is that because this entire sector is at a nascent stage right now, everyone's really looking for people who have the right intent to do it, along with skills. So they call it a combination of skill and will. Skill you can have on your resume. You can obviously tell them about your experiences, but I think will part is also really important. So you have to think through why you want to join this sector. And that is when I think being very honest about it, being very upfront about it is important.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So with this, we are taking the last question. I'm still asking if anybody has any questions to ask, so they can unmute and ask the speaker. This will be the last question. Okay, I guess most of the doubts are cleared.
Sure.
Okay, so we have one last question here. The case studies in Samgra interview are more like management case studies or something different from that?
So this is a very firm specific question, but yeah, these cases are very different from the normal management consulting cases. Normal management consulting cases is something that you can maybe read about in the general case books that are already available on public domain, including case books from all the B schools, Indian and international. And there are also other books like Case in Point and other case interviews, cracked and stuff, to get through how management consulting interviews work. But specifically about development sector, I don't think there is a specific book also. And with respect to Samagra, I think it's more important to understand the projects that they're doing. So I would recommend that you go through the LinkedIn page. The LinkedIn page has a lot of articles that have been posted recently.
Okay, so I guess we have to wrap up here, Ayush. We are short of time. So thank you so much everyone for coming and joining, and thank you so much, Akash. It was wonderful having you with us. Thank you so much for helping other people out. It was great having you.
Thank you for the opportunity. If anybody wants to connect, you can share my email ID or my LinkedIn handle. Would be happy to resolve any queries that there may be.
Thank you so much everyone for attending the session.